Financial Exploitation and Identity Theft, Part 2. I look forward to going through. I have to get everything all set up again. Whoops, what happened? Are you seeing my slides?
It looks like a PDF, Jackie.
Okay. Just when I thought I had things worked out. Close that. Okay, now do you have the slides? What am I sharing?
It looks like this is still the PDF that's up on my screen. It's probably a PDF of your slides.
Okay. I'm having difficulty with where the pictures are showing up. Okay. Let me stop sharing. And then go back and share again. That's a PDF. This is what I want. Does that work better?
Yes, and Marcia is asking if you can send out the PowerPoint really quickly for today.
Okay, that was something I didn't get to. All of these 8 o'clock meetings are just really messing with my schedule.
I know. 8 o'clock meetings are not the greatest, especially when they butt up to the next meeting.
It would help if I got into my email instead of my calendar. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Financial Exploitation, Identity Theft, Fraud, Part 2. So when we left yesterday, I gave you all the problems, told you about all of these scam artists and everything that was going on. So now we come back and we're going to try to find some of the solutions to those problems. One of the keys to successful interventions was the Tribal Law and Order Act, which allowed tribes to be able to have longer sentences and do a little more as far as enforcement than what they had been able to do previously. It also allowed them to bring charges against non-Indians on Indian land if they met certain criteria as far as their tribal court system. The bad side of that is most tribes don't meet those criteria, and I think there's only 1 or 2 that have actually met the criteria for the Tribal Law and Order Act. But it did also allow for cross-deputation between states, counties, tribes, and feds, and things like this as far as enforcement. Another successful thing a key to that successful intervention are the values for that we have as far as the tribes. As far as for elders, we honor them, we respect them, and we want to give them dignity. So holding on to those values and utilize those values in interacting with people can be really beneficial. And we need to start planning for the future today as to how those things are going to be addressed. Part of that, as I said earlier, was screening for abuse. So a best practice is that everybody should be screened at intakes for senior services, for any types of services they may be applying for. And like with the senior center and other events, you need to make talking about these difficult topics more normal, that it's something that is discussed openly so that people are more willing to talk about what's been happening. Our Native elders, we talk about disrespect and not abuse. And we covered that a little bit in one of the other sessions, how when you ask about abuse, that they'll say, no, it didn't happen. But when you start talking about disrespect and how they might have been disrespected, that they will open up and start telling some of those stories about what has been happening. And when we start asking those questions and having those conversations, it creates that potential to catch the abuse at an early stage before it escalates and becomes more dangerous. And I've covered before that elder abuse is any knowing, intentional, or negligent act by a caregiver or any other person that causes harm or a serious risk of harm to a vulnerable adult. In screening, you talk about how with the caregivers, how they handle the stress of taking care of the elder, how they get their breaks, who comes in and gives them respite, things like that. What types of support do you have for managing your stress? Do they need to go out and run? Do they have things that they can do to help them decrease their stress? Are they ever worried that they might hurt the elder that they're caring for? You know, sometimes those things happen, and if they're worried about it, maybe they need to learn some ways of managing whatever fragility that elder has. Have you ever hurt the person that you care for? As I said, sometimes that's accidental, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's due to those stresses. And do you ever ask the person that you care for to give you money or other resources? Again, getting into some of those gray areas that can then cross over into abuse. So for financial exploitation, you know, going into that, have you ever been disrespected? And if you have, how? Are you comfortable and are you able to cover your bills with your income? Well, what gets in the way of that happening? Does anybody else have access to your money? And what do they use it for? How are they, when they have access to your money, what do they do with it? Is anybody taking or using your money without your permission? Do things disappear? Sometimes, with our memory the way it is, we might forget where we put something, but other times people take advantage of that and things start disappearing because they think you won't notice. Is anybody taking your things without your permission? And having those prevention talks with the elderly. Planning ahead, you know, talking with them before it's an issue of who do you want to take care of you when you need help? Or who now takes care of you when you need help? And under what conditions would you want someone to manage your finances? At what point would you have to get to that you would be willing to turn your finances over to someone else to help out with things? Under what conditions would it be okay to be placed in a long-term care setting? Do you have a will, a power of attorney? When we talk about types of power of attorney, there are 4 types. There's a limited, which just covers a specific situation or time period. There's a general, which, as it says, can cover anything for any length of time. There's a durable, which is a long-lasting power of attorney. And there's a springing power of attorney. And the springing power of attorney, you lay out the specific criteria that have to take place in order for that power of attorney to become effective. Also, when we talk about prevention for elderly, we want them to stay connected. You have people that regularly come to the senior events and they're not there. What's done? Does anybody pay any attention, or just, oh, they didn't make it? Or do you have kind of a buddy system where if somebody's gone, somebody's checking up on them to make sure they're okay? Being cautious, not giving money or resources without checking out where it's going to, what it's for. Is this something you really want to do? Can you afford to do it? Asking all of those questions. Reporting your suspicions. If you think that abuse may be going on, tell someone. Because if it's at the point that you think it might be happening, it probably is, and you need to have someone that has the authority to do the investigation. And then asking authorities to intervene and investigate and do what needs to be done. So at this point, any questions? We've covered some of this a couple of times, but I just want to check in and make sure there aren't any questions at this point. No questions? All right, what you've all been waiting for, scams. So I talked about the different types of scams, the foreign lotteries, identity crime, home repairs, the pigeon drop that I talked about, cold callers, those that use robocalls or just keep calling until they get somebody to answer the phone. And usually the ones that are at home and the ones that feel like they have to answer the phone when it rings are the elderly. The grandparent scam and the Medicare scam. So on the Medicare card number, your personal information, as I said yesterday, to guard it like a credit card because it can be used to gain lots of resources and be charged against you where you may not be able to get the care you need at the time that you need it. All right. Now, I talked a little bit yesterday about the IRS and the tax scams, that the IRS never emails or calls you. So the hard part is a lot of times these things are very aggressive. I know I've gotten a number of them saying that I owed money to the IRS or somebody else, and if I didn't pay it immediately, they would send the sheriff over to arrest me and all of this. And, you know, it can be pretty scary unless you know that that's not something that's going to happen, that the IRS will contact you by mail, and then you may call them, but they don't call you. These con artists are really cunning. They know how to find those vulnerable lines and things like that to throw out there and really make you question whether or not it's legitimate. So the best thing is, if you do not know the number, don't answer. And teaching the elderly that it's okay not to answer the phone if you don't know who's calling. Some tips as far as the counterfeit prescription scam. Tips for avoiding this: be mindful of the appearance. If there are misspellings and things like that in the ad, it's probably not a good deal to put your money in it. Talk to your pharmacist or your physician if the prescription drug looks suspicious. Sometimes when pharmacists fill a prescription, it looks different. And it's because they've gotten that particular medication from a different vendor. So just asking them about it and they can tell you if that's what it is or not. Let your pharmacist and your physician know immediately if your medication causes any adverse side effects or if you're not improving with that medication. And then be cautious when you're purchasing drugs on the internet, and don't purchase them from unlicensed online distributors or those who sell medications without a prescription. I know you hear things all the time. Oh, you can get that online much cheaper. And you need to just remember that that's not wise to do. You take a real chance on it being counterfeit. And they need to have a verified internet pharmacy practice seal of approval, the VIPPS. And that's provided by the Association of Boards of Pharmacy in the United States. And if they don't have that seal saying that they're approved by them, don't even touch it. Be aware that product promotions and cost reductions and other special deals may be associated with a counterfeit promotion. Funeral and cemetery scams. Have you heard of any of these? Well, some of the tips to avoid those include being an informed consumer. You know, it's really morbid, but educate yourself about caskets before you buy one. It's important to know, you know, what you need, you know, everything from the low end to the high end, because most of the time when they show them to you, they're only going to show you the high end. Know the difference in basic fees and additional fees. When you deal with a lot of these situations, what does basic fees cover and what are these additional fees and what do they cover, so that you know what is required. Know what the state laws are as far as embalming rules, because that can vary some from state to state. And make sure that, you know, what's needed for your state or where you plan to be taken care of is covered in any of these insurance for funerals or cemetery. Read all the contracts and the purchasing agreements before you sign anything. It's always good to deal with an attorney and have them look over anything like this, especially if it's going to be for something that you're not going to be able to go back and and check on yourself. Understand that all contract and cancellation and refund terms, if you decide you don't want to go with them, can you get your money back? What portion of your money can you get back? And before you prepay, make sure that you're well informed as to, you know, what their reputation is, how all of this works, that everything that you planned on being taken care of is. Don't allow yourself to be pressured into making purchases or signing contracts or committing funds unless you're absolutely sure. We go back to the disaster relief. And a lot of what I put on here is hurricane, but there are other things in other parts of the country. Wildfires, tornadoes, floods, blizzards, all kinds of disasters in different areas where people need help. So it's really important to avoid those cleanup scams. Careful about checking your insurance and having that information, and making sure that if you're giving to one of these disaster funds, that it's actually going to the disaster. So how do we do that? Well, check with local consumer protection officials to see if the debris removal contractors are licensed in your area. Ask for references. Who else has this person worked for and what kind of a job did they do? Write down the contractor's driver's license and vehicle information. Ask the contractor for a license and certificate of insurance, showing that if something happens that they're, you can recover the costs of any damage. And if you're told your damage is covered by insurance, contact the insurance company to confirm that. Just because some contractor tells you the insurance will cover it doesn't mean that the insurance actually will cover it. Get a written estimate and sign a written contract. You need to pay with a credit card. As far as the written contract, you want a description of the work, the materials, when it's going to be finished, the price, the address and phone number of the contractor. So you want all of that information in there so that you have somewhere to go and something saying that this is what you agreed to pay for. Pay with a credit card or a check so you can dispute the charge if there are problems later on. And you need to be really wary of those that want you to pay in cash. Negotiate a reasonable down payment because they may have to purchase supplies and things like that. And then the balance is to be paid when the work is completed to your satisfaction. And if you have any doubts, you have 3 days to cancel the contract. Charity scam prevention. As I mentioned earlier, donate to charities and funds that you know and you trust. There are so many that pop up after a disaster that don't have anything to do. The money just goes into the person's pocket. They may sound very similar to the ones that are legitimate, like maybe it's the American Cancer Society instead of the American Cancer Foundation, or American Cancer Association instead of the American Cancer Society. Things like that that are very similar. So you really need to do your homework, especially those that seem to spring up overnight. And I know with GoFundMe pages and things like that, a lot of things do spring up overnight for certain situations, but you need to look into those and see how that money is accounted for as to how it's going to be spent. Who has control of it? Who determines that? There was one that came up a few years ago about a homeless guy that just had this really great radio voice. And he had helped somebody out. And so they wanted to do something for him. So they started a GoFundMe page. Well, pretty soon it had, close to 7 figures in it. And the people that set it up took most of the money. They maybe gave this guy like $20,000 and they took the rest of it. And so it was shut down by GoFundMe really quick, and they had to really work to get the money back. So, you just never know what people are going to, they started out with good intentions and then they saw how much money there was and then things changed. Designate the disaster to ensure the funds are going to the disaster relief instead of general funds. I don't know if you know this, but like the American Red Cross, when you donate to them, if you don't designate that it's for a specific disaster fund or something like that, then it goes into their general fund to be used on whatever they determine it needs to be used for. Don't click on links or open attachments and emails unless you know who sent it. And when I say that, I mean look at the whole email address, not just the name on the front. Because sometimes people spoof those things. We get them all the time at the university that they use somebody that's maybe an administrator at the university, and then they have this other email address behind it that's a Gmail or something like that. And it comes across and it looks really official the way they send it. But you've got to notice that address and know that that's a scam. Okay, so don't assume that charity messages posted in social media are legitimate. Again, people take advantage of those things and try to get you to give them the money. And when you're texting to donate, make sure the number that you're texting it to is actually for the charity that you intend to donate to. Check it out, find out if that charity or fundraiser, they usually have to be registered in your state. So make sure that you check those things out. Don't just take the number off the TV or off the email and put it into your text and donate to it. And you can go to this website on charity scams with the Consumer Trade Commission, and they are updating things about charity scams all the time. Okay, sweepstakes and lottery scams. How many of you have won $1 million? Multiple millions of dollars. Maybe somebody called up and told you you want a new TV or a car or a vacation. Well, they can identify themselves as lawyers, customs officials, lottery representatives. They tell people that they won all these things. However, you have to pay this much for shipping or insurance or customs or taxes before you can get your prize. As I said before, this is a pigeon drop. The big thing with lotteries and sweepstakes to ask yourself is, did I enter a lottery or a sweepstakes? If you didn't enter, you probably didn't win. You know, that's the big thing. Nobody's just going to call you out of the blue and tell you that you won something that you never entered. Okay, are we having fun yet? The sweetheart or affinity scams. Talked a little yesterday about the warning signs, how they pose as this perfect suitor. They want to lure you into a romance and then they loot you for all you're worth. This is a big one that Americans have lost more than 82 billion to online dating fraud, and that's only the ones that they know about. And so we don't know how many that people were too embarrassed or, you know, didn't want to let anyone know that they've been taken advantage of in that way. That they never have met you in person. They want to talk privately. I know I get friend requests on Facebook all the time from these guys that I've never heard of. And then they want to message, you know, once you respond to them, then they want to message you. And then they want your phone number and or your email address. And then they just keep reeling you in. And then they've got this online relationship and you want to set up a meeting in person, and just all kinds of excuses come up to avoid those meetings. And then it leads on into pleas for money and things that involve maybe medical expenses, things for family, problems with a business deal, and things like that. So how do we prevent those things? Be really cautious if you're using online dating sites. search online using the suitor's full name? Do their photos and claims match the social media imprint? Take a good look at the photos. A lot of times those scammers will deal in glamorous pictures of someone with model looks. Or you might have seen them somewhere else and it was on some other site. Be cautious about somebody that doesn't want their picture taken or displayed in your home or on your phone or in your social media. They may be trying to avoid the authorities. Be really cautious if someone's asking to borrow money. And if you want to lend them money, meet with them along with your legal representative to draw up a contract for repayment. This includes family. So many times we let the business part of it slide with family, and we need to do it there as well. Get legal advice before putting anyone on your bank account, your home, or other finances. I know at one point, after I was divorced, I was going to put my mom on my house, and my attorney talked with me long and hard about that. He said, you realize that if you put her name on there, she can move in and kick you out. I'm like, no, I didn't know that. But you know, really thinking about it, you know, how do you have to set these things up to protect yourself? Get legal advice before changing your will or establishing a power of attorney. If your attorney wants to check someone out, let them. They are there to protect you. Meet with your legal advisors without the other person. That way they'll be able to really determine what your wishes are and what may be someone trying to influence you. Okay. The grandparent scam. I talked about how my parents have been taken advantage of by this. And one of the things that, you know, when you're in the middle of the night and it's a family member and you're not thinking really clearly because they just woke you up, you need some things that you can use to identify people. Ask for an identifying word or a piece of information that only that person would know. A pet's name, the last time you saw them, things like that, that can really help to identify that it's really the person that they say they are. Don't send any money before trying to contact that individual. So after you hang up, you don't go right out and wire the money. You call that person back to see if they answer, and you check it out with them. If you can't contact them, contact another family member or a financial advisor and talk it over with them before sending any money. Drug smuggling scams. So you're enticed with the promise of inheritance or business opportunity. You fly to other countries. Maybe you're given travel and expenses paid for lavish overseas trips. But you're asked to deliver that present or gift. And then you find out it's drugs and you end up detained by the local authorities. So what do we do now? Well, oops. There are a number of types of fraud. Including business fraud, credit card fraud, internet auction fraud, investment schemes, the Nigerian letter or 419 fraud. You're familiar with that term? 419 fraud is the schemes violate section 419 of the Nigerian criminal code, and that's why they're called a 419 fraud. And then non-delivery of merchandise. Have you ever ordered anything online and it never came? Especially if you get anything like off Facebook and places like that, those ads that pop up. So a lot of those are scams, and you need to be really careful about your safety and making sure that you just check everything out and make use of your legal representatives. Don't just jump in and say, oh, this looks like a good deal. I'm going to flip this house that I got really cheap on the internet. And you may have bought swamp property in Florida, if anything at all. Tech support scam. Using the phone to break into the computer. Talked a little bit about how, you know, they'll call and say they're tech support from somewhere and you got a virus and give them remote access. I only have one person I'll give remote access to my computer, and that's the IT person that I work with at the med school. I only give it to one of the IT techs. I've never given it to anybody else. So how do we protect? You're at risk from strangers and those close to you. So you can be scammed by anybody. The important things, don't isolate yourself and stay involved. Going to the senior center, interacting with people, having these presentations where you can talk about these things. Always tell anyone that's trying to sell you something that I never buy from or give to anyone who calls or visits me unannounced. Send me something in writing. That gives you some time to look it over and check things out. Shred all of your receipts with your credit card number. Sign up for the do not call list. Take yourself off multiple mailing lists. Black out your name and prescription numbers and all of that off your prescription bottles before you throw them away. You know, all of those things you need to do to protect yourself from scams. Use direct deposit for your checks to prevent the checks from being stolen from the mailbox. Or you sign them and somebody doesn't get them deposited for you. Never give your credit card, banking, Social Security, Medicare, or other personal information over the phone unless you initiated the call. If someone called you and is asking for that information, you say, oh, I need to go get it, I'll call you back. And then you call whatever that place is, Social Security or Medicare or the bank or whatever, you call them back. Be skeptical of all unsolicited offers and do your research. It's so important to look into them before taking advantage of them. How do you protect your loved ones? Some signs to look for. Any unusual or recent changes in the person's accounts. Have they suddenly appeared confused, unkept, and afraid? Are utility, rent, mortgage, medical, or other essential bills going unpaid despite the fact that they have plenty of income? Will the caregiver not allow others any access to that elder? Well, you know, you go to the door and they say, oh, they're taking a nap, you know, they aren't available right now, you can't come in. Are there piled up sweepstakes mailings, magazine subscriptions, or free gifts laying around? If there are, they may be on the sucker list. The one that says, this is somebody you can sell anything to. It's the scammer flag, you know, that the flag goes up by your house to tell all the scammers this is where you go. So what do you do if you're a victim of a scam? Well, the first step, contact your bank or your credit card company. and work with them if you need to close and reopen another account or what needs to happen. I know when I was traveling a lot, it ended up being several times a year, I would have fraudulent charge on one of my credit cards and would have to cancel it and get another card. Cancel any debit or credit cards that are linked to the stolen account. Reset all of your PIN numbers. You know, the tendency is to just keep that same one because then you can remember it. But if you've had been scammed, you need to make sure everything is reset. Contact legal services or adult protective services if it's warranted in the situation. So those are some of the first steps. Now, identity theft. I know Susan was asking yesterday, what do we do? Well, again, contacting your bank, your credit card company, all of those same things that I just mentioned apply if someone's stolen your identity. But there's also identitytheft.gov. This is a site that helps you report and recover from identity theft. So you'll call them, they'll want you to tell them what happened, giving them all the information and everything like that. From that, then they will help you put together a recovery plan. All those things that you need to do to help recover your identity. And then you can take that plan and start putting it into action. In order to report identity theft, there are two places you can go. One is the identitytheft.gov. The other is the Federal Trade Commission identity theft section. And they can help you as well with all of that. I talked to some yesterday about data breaches, and like Experion had one just a few years ago, which is one of the national credit reporting companies. So they've got all of your information, where you've ever lived, all your phone numbers, social security number, all the different account numbers, all of that. And so when that was breached, you know, someone took some or all of that information. So it's good to follow anytime you've had identity theft or any type of breach with a credit company or anything. It's important to follow up and monitor your credit reporting for at least the next year to make sure that nobody is using your data. I know when I've done some of the checks, one of my email addresses is on the dark web. But as far as I know, it hasn't ever been used. But you need to check those things out and see where your information is. These are the three national credit reporting companies and their contact information. After the Experion breach, Equifax offered free monitoring to anyone for the next year. But whenever they offer any of those free monitoring or those monitoring things, especially if they offer a free introductory, something like that, check for trial periods. This is, you know, this is free for the first 30 days or something like that. And then there's a fee that comes every month or every quarter or something like that following that trial period. And you have to do the cancellation or you're going to be charged, you know, every time that comes up. There may be other restrictions that, you know, automatic renewals, things like this. You need, if you're asked for a credit card or a debit card or a bank account number, you can count on there being additional fees if you aren't watching as to how long that free trial lasts. So if you're going to use it, many times it's good, use it or sign up for it, check things out, cancel it right away so you don't have that trial period lapse and you end up being charged for it. There are different types of fraud alerts that you can put on your accounts. There's initial a fraud alert that lasts for 90 days. And this is for if you believe you are or about to become a victim of fraud or identity theft. And, you know, the creditors must verify who you are before they'll open an account in your name. Then an extended alert lasts for 7 years. This is for after your identity has been stolen and after you file an identity theft report, that it monitors that then for 7 years. And then security freezes, and you have to be really careful with this one because it prevents new creditors from accessing your credit file and others from opening accounts in your name. So, you know, then if you need to open an account, you know, you're just up creek because you can't open one anymore once that's on. But it doesn't prevent the thieves from taking over your current accounts, the ones that are already open. So what can be done? Again, the free help from Theft.gov. Get a personal recovery plan that'll take you through each of the steps. They'll create an identity theft affidavit that you can review and update, and you can provide that. They'll do custom pre-filled letters to send to credit bureaus and businesses and debt collectors that you need, because you can't just go around saying I've had my identity stolen. You have to have some proof of it, and this gives you that proof. You can return anytime and update things and track your progress and get advice about what to do if you're affected by specific breaches of data. Okay. I guess I duplicated some of these in here. So let's kind of review. What have you learned that you're going to take home and use right away? Any new information in what I provided? You all knew all of this? Well, maybe you can teach me. Are there things I didn't bring up that you know about?
Yeah, Jackie, yeah, this is Mike. I just wanted to say, I'm not into this world, this world a lot like all these other in the frontline workers. But when you reference disrespected versus abuse, it was really big. It was a really big like head jolt with my hand, because I never really thought of it that way. But it makes sense, especially as I've learned a few things. With some caregiver classes that we've been working with at our local tribe, or with our local tribe. So that was just kind of a big thing for me, and I think that's very important for all of us to recall and remember this. They may not use the same verbiage that we do, but listen to those other keywords. Well,
and abuse is something that people tend to, kind of jerk when you bring that term up. And, disrespect, they can talk a lot about how they're being disrespected as an elder. And a lot of those things, may not be anything that's abuse or neglect, but it's going to open the door to you getting to those things.
Yeah, so that's an important fact for me.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Anything else that was new information, or have you got any information for me that I didn't cover? Any of this that you're going to take and use within the next 3 months, if not today? Marcia, I can see you picking up all of these different types of things to come up with all kinds of warning materials that people need to use, and then getting them out to your seniors. You're just really good at that. All right. So let's reflect back. Are there any situations in your community where you can apply what I've covered today?
I think in the communities that Marcia and I both work in, we can apply these almost on a daily basis.
Wonderful. So you found that useful. And
Very useful.
did I answer your question from yesterday, Susan?
Yes, you did very well.
Okay, great. What do you see as your role? I know you all have different roles in addressing a lot of this and taking a look at how these things, I mean, it may be your role as a family member. It may be your professional role. It may be in some other aspects. But thinking about, you know, what your role is, being able to share this information with others or make use of the information with others. It may be, you know, a lot of times our elders that have identity theft or something like that, they can't do the computer stuff, so it's sitting down and going through it with them on Theft.gov. You know, there are all kinds of things that that can really be a help. All right, well, here's all of our contact information for NIEJI. We've got all kinds of resources up there. We are planning the launch of our, it's not going to be called pharmaceutical. We just decided this morning it's going to be medication issues, I'm sorry. It will be the new module, and that's going to launch on Monday and will be available. We were just, you know, putting some finishing touches on it today and the rest of this week, and then it'll be ready to go up on the website on Monday. So we welcome you to make use of any of the resources that we have. We'll be having more fact sheets and the new poster. We haven't printed them yet, but the new poster PDF is up on the website, I believe, at this point in time. If not, it will be shortly. So we're getting all of those things out and available as soon as we can make them, get everything done. So I thank you very much. It's been great going through all of this with you. And are there any questions? I can't hear you, Marcia. Your voice died. If you need to put it in the chat, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We have this technology vortex this week that we just never can predict when we're going to have sound or anything else. Oh, we've got some things in the chat. Let me look. Okay. Sometimes it's hard to convince a person that they're actually being scammed. It's so hard to overcome scams that are out of the country and the state because of law enforcement limitations. Thanks for all the information. I'm glad it was helpful for you. And some of those resources I gave you, they are national, so they can help you even across state lines. Now, international stuff, that, you know, it's just really tough. Yes, I'm a household budget counselor, and I'll be sharing much of this information with my clients. Great. And Anita has some COVID-19 scam information to share. We also have a COVID-19 page that does include some of that information on it. So feel free to make use of that. Marcia says she's got no mic, but she'll definitely use the identity theft issues. And, oh, Anita is senior Medicare patrol counselor. That's really a good place to be getting some of those information out. And Marcia thinks that there's a lot of events in the future on most of the topics. Okay, a lot of thanks for the presentation. Thank you. And if there aren't any questions, I'll say goodbye for now, and we'll get into other things tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thank you very much, Marcia. You guys have a great day.
Thank you.